You see, brothers and sisters, who you truly are, your soul will last forever. What you have, honor, wealth, connections, control, titles, degrees, self-absorbed pleasure, they'll eventually fade away. Another way of putting this is who you are, you'll take into the next life, and what you have will be left behind. If you're putting your hope in having possessions, accomplishments, power, and pleasure, you'll cling to the illusion of the fall, that we can make ourselves happy without God. That hope is not only an illusion, it's an addiction. It's like the rich fool in Luke's Gospel, chapter 12, who's had a good harvest. And what does he do? But he tears down his barn to build a bigger one so he can cram more stuff into it. In modern times, we read it as having a big bank account, a wide-range investment portfolio. Tear the old barn and build a new one. Then the devastating assessment on the part of the rich man. What does he say? I've acquired many good things which will last many years. In the meantime, I'm going to rest, drink, and be merry. That's the spiritual lie. Namely, my possessions will make me secure. It seems like such an obvious lesson, but like Adam and Eve, we all fall into the trap. What will make me happy? Outside the garden, we most instinctively gravitate towards some version of possessions. The reason I'm insecure is I don't have enough money. The reason I'm insecure, I don't have enough honors. People don't respect me enough. I don't have enough connections, political clout. Whatever your addiction is, we think that the more we have, the happier we will be. That's just not true. What does God say to the rich man? You fool, this night your life will be demanded of you. Mind you, your life, not what you have, but who you are. This night, your heart, your soul, who you are will be required of you. Are you a generous person who is in communion with God and fellowship with your brothers and sisters? Or are you living out of your false self as you gorge yourself on your possessions? As Oscar Wilde once noted, the consumer is being consumed by his consumption. Thus, Jesus says, will be for those who store up treasures for themselves, but are not rich in what matters to God. What matters to God is the quality of your heart, the quality of your soul. That's what's going to get you into heaven. It's not your stuff. What matters to God is your character, who you've become. What is it? Your character is your heart that's been developing through a whole series of moral choices, either for or against communion and fellowship, either for or against love. People of God, throughout the day, we're given the opportunity to be either generous with our own life or to be self-absorbed. We have a choice to either will the good of the other or to fall into self-absorption, to defend ourselves, to cling to ourselves, to seek possessions, is to stay stuck in decreation brought about by the fall. As St. John Paul II in his ethical writings said, that every moral act produces two results. Some moral effect on the world, and it helps to create the one who performs it. It makes you the kind of person you are becoming. Are you choosing being or having? St. Paul, in his letter to the Colossians, chapter 3, says, put to death that false self that's obsessed with possessions, which are therefore resistant to love. Listen to that. Possessions resist love. You cannot love God or others if you're clinging to your possessions. And he gets very specific. When we cling to our possessions, we become immoral, impure, passion, evil desire, the greed that is idolatry. See, to be immoral is to resist the path of love. To be impure is to turn one's sexual energies on oneself. To have an evil desire is to want to harm another rather than to love him. To be idolatrous is to honor as highest something lower than love, because God is love. That's what God is. Then Paul says, having taken off this false self, this earthly self, this illusory self, Paul says, put on a new one, which is being renewed in the image of the Creator. Brothers and sisters, that's it. That's the whole story. That's the heart of it. What God wants, which is revealed in Genesis 1 through 2, is to share his life with you and I, so that we might become like him and reflect the wonder of his being. The new or true self is Christ living as you, as the self ordered to love. And Paul says, when you've got that self, you've been renewed in the image of your Creator. So, brothers and sisters, ask yourself, who are you? Which is more important than what you have, though the world tells you in 1,000 ways just the opposite. Who we are is infinitely more important than what we have. We're meant to be conformed to the image of God, who is love. Keep in mind that Adam was meant to be priest and king of Eden. His purpose was to be missionary, to Edenize the world. His purpose was to bring life to the world. When he went from being to having, he went from being in creation in a lush garden to being in decreation, which turned the garden into a desert. Welcome to the world we live in. The fall introduced sin and death to the world. We're now trapped by the illusion of being separated from God. But we still have the same mission as Adam and Eve had, to bring life to the world. If we can't save ourselves, if we can't reverse the harm done by our rebellion, God is not going to abandon us. Indeed, the rescue operation began soon after God informed them of the consequences brought about by their disobedience. Rather than cast them aside, for the man and his wife, the Lord made leather garments, which he clothed them. Do you see what he did? God became the divine seamstress, covering their shame. And at that point, he initiates the process of bringing us back to the garden. The rescue operation has begun. God is going to gather a people back to himself, and he begins the process with the patriarchs, particularly Abraham, who will be the subject of our next reflection. And as we prepare for next week, I ask you to reflect upon this question: who do you see yourself as? Do you see yourself as made in the image of God, who is a beloved child of God? Or do you see yourself as someone who just accumulates and has stuff.